Good evening, and welcome to our quiet corner, where the whispers of history mingle with the gentle hush of the approaching night. Tonight, as the world outside settles into its twilight slumber, we invite you to embark on a tranquil journey through the life of a figure whose very name evokes a myriad of images. A man whose face, etched into the collective consciousness, has become both a symbol and a mystery. We will trace the path of Ernesto Guevara, known universally as Che, allowing his remarkable story to unfold like a soft tapestry before your mind's eye. A narrative crafted not for drama or tension, but for the profound calm it can bring, helping you gently unwind and drift into the peaceful embrace of sleep. His was a life filled with paradoxes, a healer who became a warrior, a liberator who willingly walked away from paradise, choosing instead a path that led to his ultimate, poignant end in a remote Bolivian ditch. His adversaries, in 1967, believed that by extinguishing his life, they could also extinguish the fervent flame of revolution he carried. Yet, in their attempt to bury him, they inadvertently transformed him, not into a forgotten memory, but into an immortal, a symbol that grew even more powerful in death than he had ever been in life. So, as the day's concerns begin to recede, let us prepare to meet the human being beneath the enduring myth, to understand why, more than 5 decades after his passing, the world still finds itself unable to release its grip on his compelling story. Settle in now, letting every lingering thought from your day dissolve into the quietude, and allow yourself to gently drift along on this unfolding narrative, a journey through a life that by its very nature refused to be anything less than extraordinary. This is the bedtime biography of Che Guevara, beginning with the quiet secrets of his earliest days. The birth certificate, a document meant to enshrine the factual truth of one's arrival into the world, held within its official stamp and signature a small, carefully constructed untruth. June 14th, 1928, it declared, with all the unimpeachable authority of the Argentine state. Yet, the infant Ernesto, a tiny, squalling bundle of new life, had in fact graced the world a full month prior, on the 14th of May, a subtle secret already woven into the tender fabric of his nascent existence. His mother, Celia de la Serna, a woman of grace and societal standing, had found herself in desperate need of this gentle fabrication. In the Argentina of the 1920s, a society still deeply rooted in tradition and unwavering social propriety, the timing of such an arrival, a woman 3 months pregnant at her own wedding, could unleash a torrent of whispered gossip and unyielding social judgment. Such a revelation threatened to unravel the very tapestry of a family's esteemed position, casting long, uncomfortable shadows that could stretch across generations, a profound and irreparable breach of the unspoken covenants of respectability and honor. For a woman of Celia's background, with ties to the venerable lineage of Argentina's blue-blooded aristocracy, such a disclosure carried the heavy weight of social suicide, a permanent forfeiture of reputation, consigning a family to the silent, icy ostracism of the social elite. The necessity of this small deception was not born of malice, but of a deep, almost instinctual desire to protect, to shield her loved ones from the unforgiving glare of societal scrutiny, to preserve a fragile sense of decorum in a world where appearances held an almost sacred significance. And so a trusted family friend, a doctor whose ethics possessed a certain reassuring flexibility, and whose hands were both steady and discreet, made a quiet adjustment to the official paperwork. It was one small fiction, a subtle rearrangement of the truth, crafted to safeguard a family's standing, to keep the intrusive whispers and probing glances gently at bay. Both of Ernesto's parents hailed from distinguished aristocratic lineages, though their paths diverged in spirit. Ernesto Guevara Lynch, his father, carried within his very being a restless spirit of adventure, an imagination that stretched far beyond the conventional boundaries of reason. His own great-grandfather had in times long past been counted among South America's wealthiest men, though that vast fortune had, through the shifting currents of time and circumstance, long since dispersed, leaving behind only the echo of its former grandeur. Celia de la Serna, on the other hand, was true Argentine blue blood, her lineage tracing back to an ancestor who had once held sway as a Spanish royal viceroy of colonial Peru, a heritage steeped in history and ancient authority. The newlyweds, seeking refuge from the wagging tongues and watchful eyes of Buenos Aires, embarked on a quiet retreat. They journeyed to Misiones province, a region then as remote and untamed as any corner of Argentina. Here, amidst the verdant embrace of the jungle, they used Celia's inheritance to meticulously carve out a yerba mate plantation from the wild untamed land, Puerto Caraguatay. They named their nascent homestead, a place where the echoing calls of howler monkeys and the ceaseless rhythm of the equatorial rain served as their constant companions. In this secluded haven, far from the critical gazes of the city, no one paused to ask inconvenient questions about wedding dates or the precise timing of events. Yet even in this remote idyll, the prevailing local labor system presented a stark and unsettling reality. Workers known as mensu found themselves ensnared in a cruel web of debt bondage, their meager wages systematically stolen before they could even be earned, through the insidious mechanisms of company store schemes and cunningly rigged accounting practices. Most plantation owners, inured to the system or perhaps benefiting directly from its inherent cruelty, embraced this arrangement without question. But not Guevara Lynch. His ethical compass pointed resolutely in another direction. He insisted quite unfashionably on compensating his workers in actual cash, intangible currency, rather than the abstract, easily manipulated company script. His neighbors, entrenched in their customary practices, viewed him with a mixture of bewilderment and outright disdain, deeming his methods nothing short of madness. This then was the very world that subtly, yet profoundly, shaped the boy who would one day become Che, a world built in part on a gentle lie designed to protect his mother's honor, a world where his father's relative wealth stemmed from the rich, fertile jungle soil. Yet his deeply ingrained ethics vehemently rejected the systemic cruelty that so often accompanied such prosperity. It was a certain kind of beautiful madness, this steadfast refusal to compromise on basic human dignity, a madness perhaps that his son would in time inherit. That simmering rage against exploitation, that profound, almost visceral inability to avert his gaze from the stark reality of suffering, would become a foundational stone in the remarkable structure of his own evolving spirit. At the tender age of 2, a seemingly innocuous cold swim would set in motion a profound transformation in young Ernesto's life. His parents, seeking a moment of simple joy, had taken him to the beach, where the water, colder than anticipated, proved to be an unexpected harbinger of change. The gentle cough that began that very night by morning had morphed into something far more persistent, far more formidable. The doctor's subsequent diagnosis landed upon the family with the jarring force of a sudden impact, a stark and unwelcome pronouncement: chronic asthma, a lifelong companion. The attacks, unpredictable and merciless, would seize him without warning, his chest tightening with an alarming swiftness, his breathing devolving into desperate, ragged gasps for air. There were nights when his parents would discover him sitting bolt upright in his bed, a tiny figure locked in a silent, valiant struggle for breath, his lips tinged with a disconcerting blue, a vivid testament to the arduous battle raging within his small lungs. This persistent illness, this unwelcome companion, decisively ruled out any possibility of returning to the damp, humid climate of Misiones. Even their home in San Isidro, nestled close to the expansive waters of the Rio de la Plata, proved too moist, too oppressive for his fragile respiratory system. Acting upon the urgent advice of their doctors, The Guevara family packed their belongings once more, embarking on another hopeful journey to Altagracia, a charming spa town renowned for its blessedly dry climate. They resided in a succession of houses there, each move another earnest attempt to pinpoint that elusive perfect spot, that magical combination of altitude and air quality, that might, just might, afford their son the precious gift of breathing with greater ease. Villa Chicha was their first refuge, a hopeful beginning, followed by Villa Nidia, each dwelling a temporary sanctuary in their quest for solace. Altagracia itself was a place where stories of illness converged. Its streets and homes were filled with other sick children, other desperate parents, all seeking respite from the relentless grip of tuberculosis, asthma, or mysterious wasting diseases. It was the destination one sought when all other avenues for help seemed to have closed, a haven of last resort. But here is the remarkable truth about Ernesto. While his asthma might have at times confined him to his bed for days on end, transforming him into a voracious reader who devoured everything from thrilling adventure novels to dense philosophical texts, when his lungs allowed, when his body granted him a fleeting reprieve from its internal struggle, he underwent a profound metamorphosis. He transformed into something else entirely, a daredevil, a spirited maniac, a child who seemed determined to challenge death itself, to tempt fate with an almost reckless abandon. He immersed himself in the local gangs, the barras as they were known, groups of spirited youngsters who ruled the dusty streets of Altagracia. They engaged in spirited skirmishes, defending their territories with an earnestness and seriousness that mirrored real warriors, armed with stones and slingshots. Ernesto, often wheezing and invariably skinny, nevertheless threw himself into every fray, every battle, with an intensity that belied his physical limitations. Where other children might have hesitated, might have backed down from a challenge, he pushed forward with an unyielding determination. When they faltered at the precarious edge of danger, he almost invariably leapt. His audacious stunts quickly became the stuff of local legend. He would hang precariously by his hands from railroad trestles, the very ground beneath him vibrating with the terrifying rumble of trains thundering directly overhead. On a dare he once drank ink, and on another occasion, he ate chalk in the classroom, purely for the perverse delight of horrifying his teachers. There was even the memorable incident when, knowing a strict teacher was about to administer a physical reprimand, he cunningly slipped a brick into his shorts. When her hand descended, she howled in pain, while he, with a quiet, steely resolve, accepted his punishment without the slightest flinch. The Guevara household itself was a vibrant, often chaotic, crucible of intellectual ferment and unconventional living. His mother, Celia, was in her own right something of a local scandal. She was one of the very first women in Altagracia to confidently drive a car, to wear trousers in public, defiant acts that subtly challenged the prevailing social norms of the era. Their home overflowed with books, papers, often unwashed dishes, and a steady stream of children from every conceivable social class. They cultivated friendships with the children of golf caddies, the offspring of their domestic staff, anyone whose character and conversation held a spark of genuine interest. Yet, beneath this seemingly bohemian facade, the family itself was beginning to fracture. His parents engaged in constant, often terrible, screaming matches, their angry voices echoing through the house, shattering the fragile peace. Money, a perpetual source of anxiety, was always tight, his father's numerous, often ambitious, schemes consistently failing to materialize. And then there were the women, always other women, a recurring source of conflict and heartache. Young Ernesto, in an attempt to escape the escalating tension and the painful cacophony of his parents' arguments, would often flee into the surrounding countryside, disappearing for hours among the rolling hills, seeking solace and silence in nature's embrace. When Ernesto was just 10 years old, The distant rumblings of the Spanish Civil War erupted, transforming into a full-blown global conflagration, and its distant echoes ignited a profound spark within him, a flame that would, in the years to come, never truly diminish. Every evening his family would gather intently around the radio, the static-laden broadcasts, transporting them across continents, to follow the desperate, valiant struggle of the Republic against the relentless advance of Franco's fascists. Young Ernesto, far from being a passive listener, engaged with the conflict on a deeply personal level. He would retrieve a large map, carefully spreading it across the dining table, and with meticulous precision, he would mark the shifting positions of the armies with small colored flags, tracking every advance and every strategic retreat, with the seriousness and intensity of a seasoned general poring over his battlefield. The Guevaras were Republicans to their very core, their sympathies firmly rooted in the cause of democratic ideals. When Franco's forces claimed another city, a palpable gloom would descend upon the house, a shared sense of mourning for the lost cause. Conversely, when the Republic managed to secure a rare, hard-won victory, they celebrated with an unbridled joy, as if it were carnival season in their own home. His father, a man of strong convictions, co-founded Acción Argentina, a group passionately dedicated to supporting the Allies against the insidious spread of fascism. Ernesto, though still a boy, joined the youth wing, though his interest lay less in the act of marching in protests, and more in the profound intellectual endeavor of truly understanding the intricate complexities of the war, its underlying philosophies, and its far-reaching implications. Conventional schooling, in contrast, often bored him profoundly. At the Colegio Nacional Dean Funes, he moved through his classes like a ghost, his physical presence evident, but his spirit and his true intellectual engagement were often elsewhere, soaring beyond the confines of the classroom walls. His real education, the one that truly nourished his inquisitive mind, unfolded elsewhere, within the countless books he devoured, with insatiable hunger, and in the numerous notebooks he meticulously filled with his cramped, precise handwriting. He cultivated friendships with the Grano brothers, Thomas and Alberto, who would, in time, become his trusted companions in adventure, sharing escapades and intellectual debates alike. They affectionately, and perhaps playfully, nicknamed him El Pelo Baldi, a good-natured jab at his unfashionable, closely cropped buzzcut. On the rugged terrain of the rugby pitch, however, he underwent another startling transformation, shedding his studious demeanor to become Fuser, an abbreviation of El Furibundo Serna, the raging Serna. Despite the persistent burden of his asthma, he played with a ferocious, almost violent intensity that often startled his opponents. He would charge headlong into scrums, his war cry echoing across the field, tackling players twice his size with a fearless determination. His teammates learned to recognize the distinct wheeze that often preceded one of his spectacular, or occasionally foolhardy, actions, often in true Ernesto fashion, both at once. At the age of 17, he began to meticulously keep what he referred to as his philosophical notebooks. These 7 volumes, accumulating over time, would eventually brim with his evolving thoughts, meticulously recording his intellectual explorations of thinkers ranging from Freud to Marx, alongside his own reflections on nature and the very mechanics of the world. He would copy passages, engage in silent arguments with their premises, and earnestly endeavor to construct his own coherent understanding of how the world truly operated. He even grappled with the dense complexities of Das Kapital, making careful, thoughtful notes in the margins of an abbreviated edition, though he would later confess, with characteristic honesty, that he hadn't truly understood a thing. Yet for all his extensive reading, all his profound contemplation, he was not at this juncture an activist in the conventional sense. Not yet. When his friend Alberto Grano was unjustly imprisoned for protesting against the government, other students swiftly organized a march demanding his release. They approached Ernesto, extending an invitation for him to join their ranks. He, however, quietly refused. It was a futile gesture, he later explained to Alberto. He would only march, he asserted, if someone were to provide him with a revolver. Words, he believed, divorced from the potential for decisive action, were merely noise, ephemeral, and ultimately ineffectual. This, then, was the young man taking shape in Alta Gracia, a walking contradiction, an asthmatic athlete, an aristocrat who found genuine companionship among servants, an intellectual who placed his ultimate trust only in the tangible realm of action. He immersed himself in the theoretical underpinnings of revolution, but refrained from joining a simple protest. He delved deeply into the writings of Marx, but readily admitted his struggle to fully grasp their meaning. He was in essence preparing himself for something vast and undefined, though he himself was not yet fully aware of its specific contours. The world in its myriad complexities was steadily imparting its lessons, and he, ever the diligent student, was taking notes, always taking notes, for the journey ahead remained unwritten, yet to unfold. In the year 1952, at the age of 23, Ernesto, who would soon be known to the world as Che, with a quiet determination, hoisted himself onto the seat of a rather leaky Norton 500 motorcycle. This intrepid machine, affectionately nicknamed La Poderosa, the Powerful Ones, was about to embark on a journey of profound transformation. He sat behind his trusted friend Alberto Granado, then 29, whose spirit of adventure burned just as brightly. Their ambitious vision was to traverse the vast expanse of the South American continent, all the way from their native Argentina to the distant reaches of North America. The motorcycle, however, harbored its own distinct plans and would ultimately surrender completely in the rugged terrain of southern Chile, but not before bestowing upon them a journey that would irrevocably alter the course of their lives, shifting their perspectives in ways they could scarcely have imagined. To sustain themselves on this epic, often challenging odyssey, they by necessity transformed into charming con artists. They would recount a meticulously crafted tale to anyone who would lend an ear, asserting themselves as eminent leprology experts, ostensibly traveling across South America to meticulously study various treatment centers and advance the understanding of the disease. Remarkably, this well-practiced deception proved far more effective than they had ever dared to dream. Local newspapers, eager for a captivating story, ran headlines proclaiming the arrival of 2 Argentine experts in leprology travel South America. They would present themselves at various hospitals, nodding sagely at medical equipment they barely understood, and graciously accepting complimentary meals from genuinely grateful directors, their charade often going unquestioned. The journey itself unfolded as a cascade of one disaster after another, each episode more delightfully ridiculous than the last. There was the memorable incident at a village dance in Chile, where, emboldened by Pisco and an excess of confidence, Che, with a youthful indiscretion, attempted to escort a married woman outside into the night. Her husband and his friends, quite understandably, took a rather strong exception to this particular plan. The 2 Argentines found themselves fleeing through the darkness, stones whizzing past their heads, Che's wheezing laughter echoing through the cool night air, a testament to the sheer absurdity of their predicament. But interspersed between these moments of high comedy came profound encounters, experiences that stripped away the laughter, revealing a raw, unvarnished truth. In the stark moon-drenched expanse of the Atacama Desert, they encountered a communist miner and his wife, shivering uncontrollably in the biting cold of the night. The couple had been ruthlessly blacklisted, branded as troublemakers for their simple, fervent desire for decent wages and humane working conditions. They moved tirelessly from mine to mine, searching for elusive work, only to find door after door slammed shut in their faces. Che, with a quiet, compassionate gesture, offered them his blanket, then lay awake through the long night, silently observing them huddled together for warmth. Here, before his very eyes, was the proletariat he had only read about in books, the abstract concept now made achingly real. But they were not mere abstractions, they were freezing, breathing human beings with names and faces, their suffering tangible and immediate. In the bustling port city of Valparaiso, he stumbled upon an old woman, her frail body succumbing to the twin ailments of asthma and heart disease, confined to a squalid, dimly lit room. Her family, whether through dire poverty or sheer exhaustion, had abandoned her to her fate, leaving her to face the approaching end alone. Che, with a quiet empathy, sat with her through the long hours of the night, recognizing the familiar, labored cadence of his own breathing in hers, seeing, perhaps, a chilling echo of his own potential future in her present suffering. He later penned a poignant reflection on the tragedy that unfolds the lives of the proletariat throughout the whole world. But what he truly meant, what resonated deepest within him, was this specific woman, this particular room, this unbearable, crushing loneliness of dying poor and forgotten. La Poderosa, their trusty motorcycle, had finally given up its valiant struggle in Chile, yet their journey continued unabated, a relentless progression on foot, by truck, by boat, by any conceivable means of conveyance. They found work on a freighter, tended to the afflicted at the San Pablo leprosy colony, and on occasion, found themselves spectacularly drunk in the lively bars of Colombia. Each mile traversed, each new encounter, meticulously stripped away another layer of the privileged Argentine medical student, gradually revealing something raw, something unvarnished, something profoundly human beneath. By the time they reached the verdant landscapes of Venezuela, Che was in essence a fundamentally different person. The individual who had embarked on that transformative trip had, he later wrote, died somewhere along the way, perhaps in that freezing desert night, perhaps in that dying woman's desolate room. I am not the person I was before, he declared. Guatemala City, during those vibrant days, throbbed with the palpable energy of political exiles from across the vast expanse of Latin America. Every bustling cafe served as an impromptu congress, each corner hosting a different faction, passionately debating the myriad pathways to revolution over steaming cups of cheap, potent coffee. Che, with an instinctive sense of belonging, immediately found his intellectual and ideological kindred spirits. There was Hilda Gadea, a Peruvian exile of Chinese ancestry, whose mind was as sharp and incisive as broken glass. She held a position within Arbenza's government, and through her extensive network, knew everyone of consequence, connecting Che to the pulsating heart of the revolutionary discourse. He encountered Cubans, survivors of Fidel Castro's audacious, almost suicidal, assault on the Moncada barracks, still bearing the fresh wounds of their defeat, yet already, with an unyielding resolve, meticulously planning their next audacious move. The Argentine lawyer Ricardo Rojo also appeared on the scene, and together they would spend long, impassioned nights, dissecting the intricate problems plaguing Latin America, much like medical students meticulously examining a complex cadaver, seeking to understand its ailments. But mostly Che observed Arbenz with an intense, quiet fascination, watching his earnest attempts to forge a new Guatemala. He was particularly captivated by the president's ambitious effort to redistribute vast tracts of land, held for generations by the immensely powerful United Fruit Company, back to the peasants who had, for centuries, tilled its fertile soil. The American company, at that time, owned more of Guatemala's land than the nation itself controlled, a stark symbol of economic imbalance. Arbenz, driven by a profound sense of justice, sought to fundamentally alter this unjust reality. Then came the fateful month of June 1954. The Central Intelligence Agency, with a clandestine efficiency, had been relentlessly engaged in a costly campaign, expending millions of dollars to meticulously paint Arbenz as an imminent communist threat. A dangerous radical poised to destabilize the region. They swiftly hired mercenaries, ironically christening them the Liberation Army, and dispatched planes to soar ominously over the capital, dropping not only propaganda leaflets designed to sow fear and discord, but also, on occasion, actual bombs, punctuating their psychological warfare with tangible menace. They broadcast a relentless stream of lies and disinformation on clandestine pirate radio stations, a sophisticated campaign of psychological warfare that proved remarkably brilliant, effectively magnifying a mere few hundred mercenaries into the terrifying illusion of thousands. Che, his revolutionary spirit stirred, attempted to join the nascent resistance, presenting himself at government offices, urgently demanding a rifle. However, Arbenz's administration, caught in a paralyzing dilemma, was tragically indecisive, torn between the imperative to fight and the lingering hope of negotiation. The president, perhaps too cautious, too deeply rooted in a belief in established rules and legal protocols, steadfastly refused to arm the common people, fearing the devastating consequences of a full-blown civil war. He clung to the principles of law, even as his enemies operated with a singular ruthless focus on raw power. Che watched this fatal hesitation unfold with a growing sense of disgust and frustration. Here, he realized, was the revolution's pivotal crucial moment, and instead of decisively seizing it, everyone seemed preoccupied with meticulously consulting the Constitution, rather than urgently assessing their ammunition stockpiles. The end, when it came, was swift and brutal. The army, swayed by external pressures and internal dissent, turned decisively against Arbenz, and he, rather than precipitate a bloody internal conflict, resigned his office. He broadcast his farewell speech on the radio, his voice heavy with resignation, as Che listened in a deepening rage. The president ultimately fled to the sanctuary of the Mexican embassy, a poignant symbol of his defeat. The vast contested land reverted to the control of United Fruit. The peasants, their hopes cruelly dashed, returned to their grim reality of starvation. Everything, it seemed, reverted to its former unjust state, save for the thousands who would subsequently be tortured and brutally killed for the simple, audacious act of believing that change was truly possible. Che, in his profound disillusionment, famously termed it a terrible shower of cold water. Yet even that stark phrase failed to fully capture the depth of his burgeoning fury, the searing conviction that had now taken root within him. He fled to Mexico, carrying with him a searing lesson etched irrevocably into his brain. Democracy, he concluded, was a precarious luxury, one that only the powerful could truly afford. Elections, he realized, were rendered meaningless if the vanquished possessed both the weapons and the unyielding will to employ them. Guatemala had unequivocally demonstrated to him that revolution, to be truly effective, needed to be total, uncompromisingly violent, and utterly irreversible. One could not, he determined, negotiate with the insidious machinations of empire. One had to dismantle it completely, or it would inevitably dismantle you. In the warm, bustling confines of Maria Antonia Gonzalez's apartment in Mexico City, a fateful encounter unfolded in July of 1955, a meeting that would imbue Che's simmering rage with a singular compelling purpose. Fidel Castro, with his towering presence and magnetic charisma, seemed to fill the very room, his every word and gesture resonating with an almost tangible energy. He spoke with his hands, his voice, his entire being, painting vivid, impassioned pictures of Cuba's systemic corruption, its glittering casinos and sprawling brothels catering to affluent American tourists, while in stark contrast, the peasants in the countryside languished in abject starvation. Fidel had just been released from a Cuban prison, yet his spirit remained unbroken, his mind already meticulously charting a course back to the island to overthrow the entrenched Batista dictatorship. The sheer audacity of his vision was breathtaking, and Che from that moment was irrevocably hooked. They conversed deep into the night, Fidel eloquently articulating his revolutionary blueprint for Cuba, a nation then plagued by a regime that epitomized inequality and civility. By the first faint blush of dawn, Che had unequivocally agreed to join the audacious expedition, not merely as a combatant, but specifically as the group's doctor, a testament to his ingrained healing instincts, even as he embraced a path of revolutionary violence. Later, Che would reflect that while it had taken Fidel 10 hours to recruit him, in truth it should have taken no more than 10 minutes. He had, in essence, been waiting for this precise moment ever since the hopeful promise of Guatemala had so brutally collapsed. For the ensuing year, Che immersed himself in rigorous training alongside the Cuban rebels in Mexico. Their days were filled with intense physical conditioning, practicing marksmanship at a dusty firing range known as Los Gamitos, learning the intricate, often brutal tactics of guerrilla warfare from a seasoned veteran of the Spanish Civil War, and embarking on grueling hikes up volcanoes until their lungs burned with exertion. Fidel, recognizing Che's unwavering intensity and meticulous nature, appointed him as a safe house leader, a decision that initially caused a ripple of irritation among some of the Cuban exiles. Who, they wondered, was this Argentine to issue them orders, to presume authority over those born of Cuban soil? Yet, Che's sheer commitment, his willingness to push himself and others harder than anyone else, gradually, steadily, earned him their profound respect. Life, however, grew complicated in August of 1955. Hilda Gadea, his intellectual comrade from Guatemala, was pregnant with his child. They married out of a quiet sense of decency and responsibility, though Che's heart even then was not entirely consumed by the bonds of domesticity. Their daughter, Hilda Beatriz, a tiny beacon of new life, arrived in February of 1956. Che loved his baby with a quiet tenderness, but found himself feeling increasingly trapped by the burgeoning demands of domesticity. He was, after all, training relentlessly for a revolution, yet simultaneously finding himself changing diapers, a stark contradiction that gnawed at his revolutionary soul. In June, Mexican police, acting on an anonymous tip, raided their training camp. Someone, likely for monetary gain, had betrayed their location. Che spent 57 days incarcerated, and during his interrogation, he made a crucial, uncharacteristic error. When his questioners probed his political beliefs, he, with an unyielding honesty, told them the unvarnished truth. Yes, he affirmed, he was a communist. Yes, he passionately believed in armed revolution as the only viable path to liberation. And yes, he firmly believed that capitalism, in its very essence, was irrevocably doomed. Fidel, upon hearing of this candid confession, was understandably furious. He had been meticulously cultivating a moderate public image, speaking eloquently of democracy and constitutional reforms to garner international support and avoid alienating potential allies. Now, his outspoken Argentine doctor was inadvertently alarming those very allies with his uncompromising honesty, risking their precarious enterprise. Yet, Fidel, with a shrewd assessment of character, did not cut him loose. Something about Che's fierce purity of conviction, his almost childlike inability to dissemble or lie about what he so profoundly believed, seemed to deeply move the Cuban leader. Or perhaps more pragmatically, Fidel recognized a supremely useful weapon when he saw one. Every burgeoning revolution, after all, needs its true believers, its unwavering saints who are willing to die for the cause without hesitation, their faith unshakable. Che, in his uncompromising honesty and fervent belief, was already subtly beginning to embody that very saintly figure. On the 25th of November 1956, 82 rebels, their hopes burning bright despite the daunting odds, crowded aboard a small dilapidated yacht named the Granma. It was a vessel designed for a mere 8 people, yet they sailed for Cuba anyway, packed in like sardines, their resolve outweighing the physical discomfort. The journey itself was an arduous ordeal, everyone suffering from debilitating seasickness, the boat relentlessly taking on water, their precious supplies already soaked and spoiling in the saline embrace of the ocean. The crossing was intended to take 5 days, a swift clandestine transit. It took 7. They were meant to land under the concealing cloak of night, but instead they arrived in the stark, unforgiving light of broad daylight, immediately mired in a treacherous mangrove swamp already, in essence, defeated before a single shot had even been fired.
3 days after their arduous, ill-fated landing, the small band of revolutionaries stumbled directly into a waking nightmare, a scene of absolute chaos and terror. The army, alerted to their presence, lay in wait at Alegria de Pio, expertly concealed amidst the towering sugarcane fields. The first brutal shots rang out, sending the rebels scattering like startled birds, their formation instantly broken, their initial resolve shattered by the sudden, overwhelming violence. Che felt a searing punch to his neck, an immediate shocking impact, followed by a terrifying warmth, rapidly spreading down his chest. Blood, his own life's blood, was now flowing freely. He instinctively dropped behind the meager cover of a tree, confronting, in that precise, agonizing moment, the stark reality that every revolutionary, in their heart of hearts, imagines he was dying. And with him, perhaps, the revolution itself was dying, or at the very least, suffering a mortal blow. A box of precious ammunition lay tantalizingly to his left, while his vital medical kit, a symbol of his prior profession, rested just to his right. He could only carry one, a choice of profound life-altering consequence. The doctor within him, by instinct, reached for the bandages, for the familiar tools of healing and preservation. Then, with a sudden decisive clarity, he paused. He instead grabbed the ammunition. Later, he would reflect upon this precise juncture as the moment he truly became a guerrilla, fully embracing the brutal exigencies of armed struggle. Medicine, he realized, could wait. The revolution, in its desperate nascent stage, needed bullets, not bandages. But first, in a quiet, almost defiant act of will, he resolved to die with dignity, to meet his end properly. He recalled a poignant Jack London story, a tale of a man facing death by freezing in the Alaskan wilderness, doing so with a profound sense of grace and composure. If he was destined to die here, in this remote Cuban field, he would do so like that character, with a quiet, unyielding dignity. Juan Almeida, another rebel, found him lying there, composing himself for death, almost like an actor preparing for his climactic scene. Almeida, however, had no interest in Che's theatrical exit. "Nobody's dying today," he declared with fierce resolve. "Get up and run." And so Che ran, blood streaming from his neck, leaving a crimson trail through the tall sugarcane fields, and into the dense concealing embrace of the jungle. Behind them, the army, with ruthless efficiency, executed the captured rebels, extinguishing lives, and seemingly, the very flicker of revolutionary hope. The revolution that had been so ardently prophesied to liberate Cuba, had by all accounts, lasted a mere 3 days. The scattered survivors, a desperate, depleted remnant, stumbled through the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Sierra Maestra Mountains, like ghosts, haunted by their near-total annihilation. Che, with a grim poeticism, called them an army of shadows, and even that description, he knew, was generously optimistic.
Of the 82 brave men who had set sail from Mexico with such fervent hope, only 22 would ultimately manage to regroup, finding each other through sheer force of will and a desperate clinging to life. They drank whatever meager water they could find, sometimes resorting to licking the lenses of their binoculars for precious moisture. They subsisted on raw corn, meagerly stolen from peasant fields, a stark testament to their hunger. They hid in damp concealing caves during the day, moving cautiously under the protective cloak of night, learning the intricate winding pathways of the mountains by the faint guiding light of the stars. Their salvation, their unexpected lifeline, arrived in the form of Celia Sanchez's meticulously cultivated network of peasant supporters. She had spent months, with quiet determination, preparing the remote mountain regions for their arrival, patiently convincing local farmers to discreetly hide food, to safely store weapons, and to bravely carry vital messages through treacherous enemy territory. Candido Garcia, a trusted guide, led them along trails invisible to the patrolling army, navigating the labyrinthine paths known only to the mountain dwellers. Slowly, painstakingly, with an agonizing slowness, the scattered remnants of the force began to find each other, coalescing once more. When Che's small group finally reunited with Fidel, the maximum leader, a formidable presence, was consumed by a quiet fury. They had lost their weapons, an unforgivable sin in Fidel's strict revolutionary creed. In his nascent revolution, losing your rifle was considered a transgression far worse than losing your very life. But they were alive, against all odds, barely, and the mountains, in their stern, unforgiving embrace, would now teach them how to truly fight. Every ravine, every hidden gully, became an impromptu classroom. Every peasant, who had endured generations of exploitation and deception by callous landlords, became a potential recruit, a wellspring of latent revolutionary fervor. Every army patrol that failed to find them, that returned empty-handed, only served to amplify their nascent legend, transforming their struggle from a desperate flight into a burgeoning myth. The government, in its official pronouncements, claimed they were all dead, their threat thoroughly neutralized. Havana newspapers ran premature obituaries. Batista's generals celebrated their presumed victory with champagne toasts. Meanwhile, high in the remote mist-shrouded peaks of the Sierra Maestra, 24 shadows were slowly, deliberately, learning to become an army, forging themselves in the crucible of adversity. Che's neck wound, a vivid testament to his ordeal, healed, leaving behind a scar he would carry forever, a silent mark of his trial by fire. The revolution that everyone had so confidently declared dead was in fact just being born, in the hardest, most brutal way possible, through blood and gnawing hunger, through a suffering so profound that it either utterly breaks the human spirit, or remarkably, transforms it into something far harder and more resilient than the unyielding mountains themselves.
That morning the peasant guide, a man named Eutimio Guerra, appeared visibly uneasy, his brow beaded with sweat that seemed to exceed the exertion of their mountain climb. Something about him was subtly, yet disturbingly, amiss. Che, with his keen revolutionary instincts, was the first to discern it, that faint, unsettling aroma of betrayal that often clings to a man poised to deliver his comrades into peril. The definitive proof of Guerra's perfidy was discovered in his pocket, a crisp official army safe conduct pass. Guerra had already once before led them into a perilous ambush, a near fatal miscalculation. He would not, Che silently resolved, be granted a second opportunity. The rebels, with a somber gravity, convened an impromptu trial right there in the heart of the jungle. Guerra, his composure utterly shattered, confessed everything, his voice choked with sobs, speaking of his starving children, his desperate circumstances, the crushing weight of his predicament. The group stood in an uncomfortable, hushed circle,
every man present understanding the grim necessity of what had to transpire, yet no one eager to be the instrument of its execution. Finally, Che, with a stark, decisive clarity, declared that he would bring an end to the uncomfortable situation. He raised his pistol, pressed it firmly against Guevara's head, and pulled the trigger. The sharp, echoing crack of the gunshot reverberated through the ancient silent mountains, a chilling declaration. The revolution, in that precise, brutal moment, had learned a new, hard lesson: how to unflinchingly kill its own when survival demanded it. In February of 1957, a genuine miracle, a beacon of hope in their desperate struggle, arrived in the unlikely form of Herbert Matthews, a reporter from the New York Times. The intrepid journalist, driven by a skeptical curiosity, had arduously hiked deep into the Sierra Maestra, seeking to verify if the whispered rumors of the rebels' continued existence were in fact true. Fidel, ever the master of theatrical presentation, transformed the interview into a masterful piece of revolutionary drama. He orchestrated a scene where the same small contingent of fighters would march repeatedly past Matthews, each time cleverly outfitted in different clothes, skillfully creating the illusion of a far larger, more formidable army. He spoke with compelling conviction of vast liberated territories that in reality did not yet exist, and recounted victories that in truth had not yet transpired. Matthews, captivated by Fidel's narrative and the sheer audacity of their survival, believed it all. The subsequent articles, published in one of the world's most influential newspapers, changed everything. Suddenly, the supposedly dead rebels were very much alive and actively fighting. Money, in a welcome torrent, began to flow in from sympathetic supporters in Havana and Miami, invigorating their depleted resources. Recruits, inspired by the myth that was now becoming tangible reality, began the arduous climb into the mountains, eager to join the burgeoning cause. Batista's government, in turn, was exposed as either a purveyor of lies or a collection of fools, perhaps both, their credibility irrevocably shattered. The myth, once a fragile hope, was steadily becoming a potent reality. Or perhaps, more accurately, reality itself was subtly adjusting to align with the compelling power of the myth. In the fluid, often deceptive, landscape of guerrilla warfare, Che was learning the distinction between the two often mattered very little. That July, Fidel, with a grave seriousness, drew Che aside, bearing news that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of his life. He was promoting him to comandante, the highest, most revered rank within the rebel army. Only Fidel himself held that singular, ultimate title. Che would now command his own column, earn his own star to proudly wear on his uniform, and be entrusted with his own vital segment of the war to valiantly win or potentially to tragically lose. The timing of this promotion was both impeccably perfect and perhaps subtly vicious. Fidel announced Che's elevation on the very same day he controversially demoted his own brother Raúl for an act of insubordination. The message, clear and unambiguous, resonated through the ranks. Loyalty, unwavering and absolute, mattered far more than blood ties. Che, embracing his new role with characteristic fervor, established his headquarters in the verdant El Humbrito Valley, and immediately began constructing his deeply held vision of revolutionary life. He created a rudimentary hospital where wounded fighters could recuperate, a bread oven that filled the camp with the impossible, comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, and an armory where eager peasants could learn the meticulous art of cleaning and maintaining their rifles. Most importantly, with a profound understanding of the power of ideas, he launched a newspaper, El Cubano Libre, meticulously teaching his often illiterate soldiers to read, using articles that spoke directly to their own revolution, their own struggle, their own burgeoning identity. This was Che, fully and powerfully, becoming himself, the warrior philosopher, a man capable of executing a traitor at dawn with a steely resolve, yet equally capable of patiently imparting literacy lessons at noon.
nurturing the minds of his comrades. He was not merely fighting to dismantle Batista's corrupt, oppressive regime. He was, with every deliberate action, constructing the nascent blueprint of the new world that would, he believed, inevitably replace it. One bread oven, one reading lesson, one act of quiet instruction at a time. The asthmatic Argentine doctor had, through the crucible of revolutionary struggle, transformed into something far harder, far stranger, and infinitely more formidable. A comandante, who held an unshakable belief that revolution demanded nothing less than the transformation of everything, and perhaps most profoundly, the transformation of oneself.
In August of 1958, Fidel, with a strategic audacity that bordered on the impossible, issued a direct order to Che, take your column, a band of hardened but weary fighters, out of the familiar sanctuary of the mountains, and embark on an epic march across the entire breadth of Cuba, heading for Las Villas province. The objective was audacious in its simplicity, yet monumental in its implication. Cut the island in half, severing the enemy's lines of communication and supply. The ensuing 6-week march, a grueling odyssey through treacherous swamps and across vast open plains, transformed his men into gaunt, walking skeletons. They devoured their horses out of desperate hunger, then resorted to gnawing on their leather belts. And finally, there was nothing left but the gnawing emptiness of their stomachs. Government planes relentlessly strafed them during the daylight hours, their roaring engines a constant reminder of their precarious existence, while at night, hordes of merciless mosquitoes feasted upon them alive, adding to their torment. Che, with a grim recognition of their spectral appearance, once again referred to them as an army of shadows. But this time, the shadows, despite their emaciated state, were steadily, miraculously winning. At the end of their arduous march lay Santa Clara, the provincial capital, a bustling city of 150,000 inhabitants, heavily garrisoned by 3,500 government soldiers. Che, in stark contrast, commanded a mere 340 rebels, most of them peasants, who had learned the harsh realities of combat in the rugged embrace of the mountains. The mathematics of the impending confrontation were, by any conventional military standard, utterly insane. But Batista's army, Che keenly sensed, was rotting from within, its morale crumbling, its resolve dissolving. He understood, with a profound clarity, that soldiers who fought merely for paychecks and a guaranteed salary would always ultimately lose to men who fought with an unshakable conviction for the promise of a better tomorrow. The crucial key to seizing the city lay in an armored train, a formidable steel serpent that Batista had dispatched as a reinforcement. This leviathan consisted of 22 cars, heavily laden with an impressive arsenal of weapons, vast quantities of ammunition, and carrying 350 well-armed soldiers. It sat imposingly on the tracks, like a metal dragon, supposedly invincible, an unassailable stronghold. Che, studying it meticulously through his binoculars, saw not an impregnable fortress, but a coffin on wheels, a monument to the government's misguided confidence. He issued a decisive order to his men: acquire a bulldozer from the nearby university. Their plan was elegantly simple, yet devastatingly effective. They would tear up the tracks and let the unforgiving laws of physics do the rest. On December 29th, the meticulously laid trap was sprung. The train, thundering towards the city with an unstoppable momentum, struck the broken rails at full speed. Cars jackknifed and derailed, smashing into each other with a deafening roar, like dominoes made of unforgiving steel, a chaotic ballet of destruction. Che's rebels, seizing the opportune moment, launched a fierce assault with Molotov cocktails, transforming the armored cars into fiery, inescapable ovens. The trapped soldiers inside faced a stark, brutal choice: burn alive in the inferno or surrender. They chose surrender, streaming out with their hands raised in defeat, while the rebels, exhilarated by their unexpected triumph, could scarcely believe their luck. The spectacular fall of the train irrevocably broke Santa Clara's will to fight. Soldiers, witnessing the unraveling of their supposedly superior forces, began deserting by the platoon. Even the police chief, sensing the inevitable tide of change, covertly switched sides. The local mob boss, a pragmatic figure, offered his services, aligning himself with the ascendant power. Che, despite fracturing his elbow in a fall upon his arrival in Havana, amidst the triumphant chaos of victory, Fidel Castro, with a subtle yet deliberate strategic genius, assigned Che a specific, rather symbolic post, not the gleaming modern Camp Columbia military headquarters, which was bestowed upon the charismatic and immensely popular Camilo Cienfuegos, but rather the ancient foreboding La Cabaña fortress. This formidable old stone structure, with its thick, unyielding walls and shadowy cells, had once served as the somber site where Spain had carried out executions of defiant rebels. Fidel, in his astute understanding of human nature and political necessity, recognized the potent power of typecasting. The nascent revolution, he understood, urgently required an individual capable of rigorously cleaning house, someone willing to embody the stern, unyielding face of revolutionary justice. Che, with his austere demeanor and unwavering commitment, was, in Fidel's estimation, perfectly suited for this arduous and often grim task. As the supreme prosecutor, Che assumed oversight of the tribunals, the revolutionary trials that would, in their swift and often brutal efficiency, define the foundational months of the new regime. Every night, the ancient fortress would fill with a procession of alleged war criminals, torturers who had, under Batista's rule, ruthlessly pulled fingernails from dissidents, informers who had for a paltry 20 pesos betrayed their neighbors to the secret police. While Che delegated the actual proceedings of these trials to trusted individuals such as Miguel Ángel Duque de Estrada, he reserved for himself the ultimate, weighty authority regarding death sentences. The awesome power of life and death, reduced to the stark simplicity of his signature on a document. The trials themselves were less about elaborate legal process, and more about revolutionary theater, swift, decisive, and often brutal in their conclusion. Evidence was presented, typically compelling testimonies from victims or their surviving families. The accused were granted the opportunity to speak in their own defense, though such pleas rarely altered the predetermined course of justice. Then came the verdict, almost invariably guilty, and almost as invariably, death. Che would meticulously review the proceedings in his office, the quiet ritual of smoking a cigar, accompanying his concentrated focus, his pen making precise notes in the margins of the documents. If he signed, the condemned met their end that very night, against the cold, unyielding fortress wall. The executions were carried out after midnight, under the shroud of darkness. The condemned would be led to the designated wall, offered a blindfold and the spiritual solace of a priest, though many, in a final act of defiance, steadfastly refused both. Then, with a stark finality, the rifles would crack, and another enemy of the revolution would crumple to the ground, their life abruptly extinguished. By dawn, hundreds had met their fate in this manner. The formidable walls of the fortress, steeped in centuries of history, became in these first tumultuous months a chilling monument to revolutionary justice, or perhaps, depending on one's perspective, to revolutionary vengeance. Che, with an unshakable conviction, insisted that these measures were absolutely necessary, a harsh lesson he had learned, in blood and tears, from the tragic downfall of Guatemala. Arbenz, he argued, had shown clemency, a fatal mercy to his enemies, and they in turn had utterly destroyed him, and his fledgling revolution. The Cuban Revolution, Che determined, could not afford such a perilous weakness. Every executed torturer, in his calculation, represented a future coup that would never materialize. Every dead informer was a nascent CIA plot that could never take root and blossom into subversion. This, he reasoned, was prevention ingeniously disguised as punishment, a necessary surgical operation masquerading as justice, cauterizing the wounds of the past to safeguard the future. His own father, deeply disturbed by the stark transformation in his son, journeyed from Argentina to visit him, his heart heavy with concern. "You studied medicine to save lives," the old man observed, his voice tinged with sorrow. "Now you are ending them." Che met this lament with a hard, humorless laugh. He told his father, with a chilling detachment, that he could perhaps hang a new shingle outside his old home, advertising a novel kind of practice. "Come to Guevara, where we kill people without any medical risk." The grim joke hung heavy and uncomfortably between them, like a shroud enveloping a corpse. His actions, once confined to the battlefield, now followed him everywhere, permeating every aspect of his existence. He signed papers in his office, his hand steady, while others performed the grim task of the actual shooting. But everyone understood, with a profound and unsettling clarity, that his signature was the true weapon, his pen capable of ending more lives, extinguishing more enemies of the revolution, than his rifle ever had. He had, in essence, become precisely what the revolution, in its desperate formative stages, demanded: the man who could perform necessary, brutal tasks without flinching, who could sign death warrants with the same calm deliberation with which he sipped his métis, his resolve unyielding, his purpose absolute. In a move that many perceived as an elaborate ironic jest from Fidel, they appointed Che as president of the National Bank. He, with characteristic frankness, knew absolutely nothing about the intricacies of banking, save for the fact that he harbored a deep, almost visceral disdain for banks and the financial systems they represented. When he came to sign the newly issued peso notes, he deliberately, almost defiantly, scrawled only Che instead of his full official name, like a rebellious graffiti artist tagging currency, a subtle act of mockery against the very authority he was now meant to embody. Every single bill that passed through the hands of the Cuban people carried his silent, sardonic commentary on monetary power. Later, with a further expansion of his responsibilities, they also entrusted him with the Ministry of Industries. The guerrilla fighter, whose life had been defined by the harsh realities of the mountains and the relentless pursuit of armed struggle, now found himself tasked with the formidable challenge of managing the very economy he had, in his revolutionary zeal, initially set out to dismantle. Yet, Che's vision stretched far beyond the mundane concerns of sugar quotas and production targets. He harbored a grander, more profound ambition to forge what he termed the new man, the quintessential communist human being, who would work not for the mercenary incentives of money, but out of an intrinsic love for the collective good, a selfless dedication to the revolutionary ideal. Material incentives, he passionately argued, were nothing less than capitalist poison, insidious mechanisms that corrupted the revolutionary spirit. Soviet-style bonuses and rewards, he insisted, merely served to cultivate a socialist greed, undermining the very ethos of altruism. The true revolutionary, in his idealistic schema, worked 16-hour days not for personal gain, but because the work itself was its own inherent reward. This new man would transcend selfishness, dissolving his individual ego into the boundless collective, becoming an integral, harmonious piece of the revolution's grand machinery, dedicating himself wholly to the advancement of society. He practiced what he preached with the unwavering fervor of a dedicated monk. He lived solely on his modest comandante salary, steadfastly refusing the luxurious mansions and expensive cars that other revolutionary leaders, succumbing to the temptations of power, readily acquired. When his deputy, Orlando Borrego, appeared one day in a sleek Jaguar sports car, Che, without hesitation, ordered him to return it immediately. "That's not how revolutionaries live," he sternly declared. "We're examples, not exceptions." Borrego would later remark, perhaps with a touch of exasperation, that working for Che was akin to working for Jesus Christ, if Jesus had been armed and angry. The Soviet advisors, accustomed to their own pragmatic, incentive-driven approach to socialism, were utterly bewildered by Che's uncompromising idealism, convinced he was nothing short of insane. They had been meticulously building socialism for 40 years, utilizing a complex system of production bonuses and penalty structures. Now this impassioned Argentine doctor was audaciously telling them that they had in essence been doing it all wrong, fundamentally misunderstanding the true spirit of communism. During one particularly tense meeting, Che, with characteristic bluntness, informed a room full of astonished Soviet economists that their entire system was irrevocably doomed. "You're just creating state capitalism," he asserted, his voice unwavering. "In 50 years you'll be back where you started." The room fell into a stunned silence. Nobody, especially not while accepting their vital oil and weapons, dared to openly criticize the mighty Soviets. He confided in close friends that the Soviet Union was a pigsty, a profound betrayal of everything Marx had so brilliantly envisioned. They had merely replaced the predatory mechanisms of Wall Street with the centralized authority of the Kremlin, yet in his view, had retained the same rotten self-serving heart, the ingrained belief that people would only exert themselves for personal gain. The Soviets, he believed, were attempting to construct socialism using the very tools of capitalism, an endeavor akin to trying to perform delicate surgery with a machine gun. It might technically work, he conceded, but the patient, the true revolutionary ideal, would inevitably not survive the brutal operation. For officials who consistently failed to meet his exacting standards, he devised a unique, rather unconventional solution. He established a rehabilitation camp at Guanahacabibes. It wasn't strictly speaking a prison, but rather a place where bureaucrats deemed guilty of laziness or corruption could, through the purifying discipline of hard labor, rediscover their lost revolutionary spirit. A few months of arduous sugarcane cutting, he reasoned, would serve as a powerful reminder of the fundamental reasons why the revolution had ever happened in the first place. Some, observing this harsh regimen, deemed it cruel. Che, however, with a physician's detached logic, called it medicine, a necessary intervention to purge the systemic ills that threatened to corrupt the revolutionary body. He was, in his profound idealism, attempting to transform human nature itself, to boldly prove that people could aspire to be more than just selfish animals scrambling for individual advantage. Every policy he implemented, every impassioned speech he delivered, every punishment he meted out, was an integral part of this grand, audacious experiment. Could a society truly be built where people genuinely worked for each other, rather than solely for themselves? Could a new breed of humans be cultivated, individuals who had in their selfless dedication, forgotten how to count their own money, their own gains? Che, with an unshakable faith, believed it was possible. Indeed, he had to believe it, for otherwise the entire revolution, he knew, would be reduced to nothing more than a superficial change in the color of the flag, while everything else, the profound underlying injustices, would remain precisely the same, an intolerable stagnation. By 1964, Che Guevara, despite his monumental achievements, found himself increasingly restless, feeling like a magnificent caged tiger, confined and suffocated by the endless mundane reams of paperwork. He was, in his own estimation, drowning beneath a deluge of production reports and intricate trade agreements, while his hands, accustomed to the raw, visceral embrace of a rifle, a symbol of direct action, now ached with an almost unbearable longing for its familiar weight. The revolution which he had fought so valiantly to win had, in a profound and ironic twist, achieved its victory, and that very victory, he felt, was subtly, inexorably, killing his revolutionary spirit. He had transformed into the very thing he had never, in his deepest convictions, wished to become: a bureaucrat, albeit one with a gun permit, but a bureaucrat nonetheless. Every morning, he confronted the same unforgiving desk, the same intractable problems, the same gnawing feeling that the true pulsating current of history was now unfolding somewhere else, far from his sterile office, entirely without him. His ambitious plan to ignite revolution in his native Argentina, a fervent hope he harbored, tragically collapsed before it could even truly begin. He had meticulously trained his protégé, Jorge Ricardo Massetti, equipping him with weapons, resources, and a boundless hope for success, sending him south to spark a new front. Yet, the mission, fraught with peril, lasted only a few short months before the Argentine military, with brutal efficiency, utterly destroyed it. Massetti vanished into the dense jungle, his fate uncertain, likely dead, certainly defeated. Che, in the quiet solitude of his office, read the reports detailing this devastating failure. Each setback felt like a deeply personal accusation, a stark reminder that he was sending others to die for dreams that he himself, by rights, should be actively pursuing on the battlefield. Then came February of 1965, and a moment of profound, almost defiant clarity in Algiers. Che stood before an audience of rapt African revolutionaries, and with a symbolic gesture, lit a match under his own carefully constructed existence, setting his own world ablaze. He delivered a scathing indictment of the socialist countries, denouncing what he perceived as their tacit complicity with imperialist exploitation. The Soviets, he declared with an uncompromising passion, were, in their essence, no better than the Americans, using their aid, not as a genuine hand of solidarity, but as a form of subtle, insidious chains, effectively turning vibrant liberation movements into mere puppet shows, devoid of true independence. The audience, electrified by his honesty and radical fervor, loved it. Moscow, however, was utterly furious, their diplomatic channels buzzing with outrage. Fidel, caught between the unwavering idealism of his most famous revolutionary and the absolute pragmatic necessity of maintaining his only source of oil and military aid, found himself in an impossible bind. Che returned to Cuba on March 15th, and then with a sudden mysterious finality, he simply disappeared, vanishing like smoke. There was no public explanation, no formal farewell, just a profound and unsettling absence where Che Guevara had once so vibrantly been. Rumors, like wildfire, spread through Havana, igniting fear and speculation. He was dead, some whispered. He was confined to an insane asylum, others claimed. Fidel had secretly had him killed. A dark theory suggested the CIA had eliminated him, another fearful possibility. He had perhaps even taken his own life. The truth, however, was both simpler and far stranger. He was in a clandestine safe house, meticulously cultivating a new face, diligently transforming himself into someone else entirely, preparing for his next desperate chapter. On October 3rd, Fidel, with a somber gravity, read Che's farewell letter aloud on national television. The entire country paused, their daily lives suspended, to listen to the extraordinary pronouncement. In it, Che unequivocally renounced everything: his cherished Cuban citizenship, his high-ranking government positions, and even his revered rank of comandante. "Other nations of the world call for my modest efforts," he wrote, his words imbued with a poetic sense of destiny. "The most difficult hours await me." He was leaving, he declared, to fight wherever he was most needed, wherever the flame of revolution required his dedicated hand. The letter served as his profound, irrevocable divorce from Cuba, from the comforting safety of a settled life, from any conceivable future that did not involve the ultimate sacrifice for the global revolution. He penned heartfelt letters for his parents, striving to articulate the unexplainable, the profound, almost mystical pull that drove him. For his 5 children, each received a note, carefully calibrated to their age and understanding. Be good revolutionaries. Study hard. Remember your father loved you. For his wife Alida March, he recorded himself reading love poems onto tape, his voice on occasion cracking with a raw, undeniable emotion. These were the poignant, resonant sounds of a man bidding farewell to everything he held dear, meticulously burning his bridges, even as he stood firmly upon them, committing irrevocably to his chosen solitary path. He had already secretly departed Cuba, embarking on a clandestine journey towards Africa, armed with a fake passport and a mission that to anyone but him made little logical sense. He felt an overwhelming imperative to prove that the new man, his idealized vision of the selfless revolutionary, could truly exist by becoming him completely. There would be no safety net, no possibility of retreat, no life left for him except the relentless, all-consuming pursuit of revolution. He was 36 years old, and in spirit he was starting over, the eternal guerrilla who simply could not stop fighting, because to stop for him would be to admit that the dream was merely a dream, an illusion.
In April of 1965, Che Guevara made his clandestine arrival at Lake Tanganyika, a figure transformed, almost unrecognizable. He was clean-shaven, wore thick, unassuming fake glasses, and sported a disguise so effective that it rendered him anonymous, erasing the iconic face known across continents. He adopted the unassuming nom de guerre tattoo, meaning 3 in Swahili, a silent acknowledgement that he was embarking upon his 3rd revolutionary war. The Congo, he ardently believed, would be his magnum opus, the potent spark that would ignite the entire African continent into a roaring inferno of revolution, a strategic cornerstone for global liberation. Instead, it tragically became his most brutal classroom, a harrowing education in the bitter realities of catastrophe and profound failure. The Congolese rebels he had journeyed across oceans to lead were, to his dismay, barely an organized army. Their beliefs, steeped in local superstition, included the conviction that Da, a magical water, possessed the power to make enemy bullets harmlessly bounce off their skin. Before engaging in battles, their local witch doctor would ritually sprinkle the fighters with this potent potion, solemnly declaring them invulnerable. When, inevitably, they died anyway, a grim reality that occurred with alarming regularity, the witch doctor would offer a simple, chilling explanation: they hadn't believed hard enough. Che observed this disheartening theater of magical thinking with a deepening sense of despair. How, he mused, could one possibly construct a scientific materialist socialism with soldiers who firmly believed that the very essence of revolution was inextricably linked to witchcraft? Their nominal leader, Laurent Kabila, proved to be even worse than merely absent. He frequently spent his time ensconced in lavish Cairo hotels, indulging in whiskey and making grand sweeping promises he would never, could never, keep. When he did occasionally deign to appear at the camp, it was typically to demand even more vital Cuban supplies, only to vanish again, swallowed by his own self-indulgence. The rebels, Che realized, were not genuinely fighting for socialism or profound liberation. They were fighting for whatever transient promise Kabila dangled before them. That particular week, usually the prospect of loot from captured towns. Che, with a harsh but accurate assessment, termed them a parasitic army, though even this, he conceded, felt generous. Parasites at least understood their own purpose and modus operandi. The Cuban force itself,
a hand-picked cadre of his most trusted and experienced fighters, was slowly, inexorably, falling apart under the relentless pressures of the unfamiliar African jungle. Soldiers who had been unyielding heroes in the Sierra Maestra found themselves transformed into pale, haunted ghosts in the alien landscape of the Congo. They contracted devastating tropical diseases that slowly, agonizingly, consumed them from within. They shot wildly at shadows, mistaking them for enemies, and with a crushing humiliation, often retreated from genuine confrontations. Some, their spirits broken, openly begged to be sent home. Others ceased speaking entirely, their gazes fixed blankly on the dense, suffocating jungle, as if expecting it to swallow them whole, a chillingly real possibility. Everything in the Congo, it seemed, was inherently designed to kill you, from the incessant disease-carrying mosquitoes to the ruthless, well-equipped white mercenaries. Then came the devastating letter from Argentina, bringing news that pierced through his hardened resolve. His mother, Celia, had finally succumbed to cancer, the long, arduous battle at last won by the relentless disease. Che, in the flickering, solitary light of a candle in his tent, 10,000 miles from her funeral, absorbed the devastating news. He couldn't even mourn properly, couldn't allow himself the luxury of grief. He was surrounded by soldiers who desperately needed him to be unyielding steel, not vulnerable flesh, an unbreakable symbol of strength. He poured his profound grief and mounting despair into the pages of his diary, his cramped handwriting filling with reflections on failure and death, on revolutions that, he now painfully realized, existed perhaps only in the boundless expanse of his own imagination. The end, when it finally arrived, came in November, a mere 7 months after the ill-fated mission had begun. The Congolese government forces, bolstered by the unwavering support of white mercenaries and the superior firepower of American weapons, were systematically closing in, tightening their deadly noose. The rebellion, once a beacon of hope, collapsed like wet paper, dissolving into ignominious defeat. Che, with a heavy heart, ordered his Cuban comrade from his discreet hiding place in Prague, a city far removed from the jungles and battlefields he craved. Che Guevara pored over detailed maps of Latin America with the intense focus of a chess master contemplating his final, decisive game. Bolivia, landlocked and strategically situated at the very heart of the continent, bordering 5 other nations, leapt out at him from the intricate cartography. It appeared to be the perfect, unsuspecting petri dish for incubating and spreading revolution like a virulent, transformative virus. In November of 1966, he made his clandestine arrival in La Paz, carefully disguised as Adolfo Mena Gonzalez, a nondescript, balding Uruguayan economist, complete with thick-rimmed glasses and a deliberately forgettable face. The customs officer, weary from endless inspections, barely spared him a glance, dismissing him as another unremarkable traveler. Yet, the myriad problems began almost immediately, like a cascade of unforeseen obstacles. He had fully anticipated that Mario Monge, the charismatic leader of Bolivia's Communist Party, would readily provide the necessary fighters and crucial logistical support for his audacious venture. However, on New Year's Eve, Monge made a dramatic appearance at Che's secluded camp, delivering not the promised aid, but an unexpected ultimatum. Either he, Monge, would command the revolution entirely, or he would completely withdraw all party support. Che, with a quiet, steely resolve, politely but firmly told him, in essence, to go to hell. Monge departed, taking with him the vital urban networks and the crucial political infrastructure he controlled. The revolution, still in its infancy, was orphaned before it could even learn to crawl, isolated and bereft of vital connections. The peasants, whom he had envisioned as his natural allies, these direct descendants of exploited indigenous peoples who had endured centuries of suffering and oppression, were expected to eagerly flock to their banner. Instead, they scattered in fear when the foreign-accented guerrillas approached, their wary faces reflecting deep suspicion. They had, after all, only recently received precious land through the government's nascent land reform program. Why, they reasoned, would they risk everything for strangers speaking an unfamiliar, often poorly pronounced, Spanish with distinct foreign inflections? When captured peasants, coerced or genuinely fearful, promised their support, they invariably disappeared the moment they were released, reporting directly to the waiting army, turning every seemingly friendly face into a potential death sentence. Che's vital radio contact with Havana, his sole lifeline to the outside world, went dead in January and never returned, severing their last connection. They were utterly alone, isolated in the hostile, unforgiving mountains, without supplies, without reinforcements, without any viable escape route. His debilitating asthma, a lifelong companion, returned with a renewed vengeance, leaving him gasping for breath through arduous marches, yet he forced himself to project an image of unyielding strength for his increasingly desperate men. His vital medicine supplies dwindled, then inexorably ran out, leaving him without reprieve. He would wheeze out orders between debilitating attacks, his body, the very instrument of his will, cruelly betraying him precisely when he needed it most. The Bolivian army, however, was far from alone in its pursuit. It received extensive, crucial assistance. American special forces meticulously trained them in the brutal art of counterinsurgency, teaching them to think like guerrillas, to understand the enemy from within, and ultimately, to effectively kill guerrillas. CIA advisors, with a clinical precision, studied every single mistake Che had made during his ill-fated campaign in the Congo, subtly turning his own hard-won, bitter experience directly against him. Elite ranger units relentlessly hunted his dwindling band through the mountains, as patient and lethal as wolves tracking their prey. They knew, with a chilling certainty, that time was their most potent weapon. Every passing day rendered the guerrillas weaker, hungrier, more desperate, pushing them closer to their inevitable end. In August, disaster struck once more, a devastating blow to their already fragile morale. The army expertly ambushed his rear guard at the Massacre River. 8 of his comrades lay dead, including Tanya Bunke, the sole woman in their group, a brave courier who had served as his vital connection to the outside world, a fragile link now irrevocably broken. They found her body downstream, bloated and unrecognizable, a stark, painful testament to their growing despair. Che, in his diary, recorded her death with a poignant brevity, noting that she had died doing what she believed in. But even these words, he admitted, felt hollow, bereft of genuine comfort. She had died, he knew with a crushing certainty, because he had led her here, to this remote, unforgiving place, to die. By October, their numbers had dwindled to a mere 17 starving men, stumbling through hostile mountains, surrounded by an indifferent, often hostile peasantry. The very people they had come to liberate were, in a bitter twist of fate, actively aiding the army in tracking them down. His Bolivian fighters, their courage and loyalty, stretched to breaking point, were either deserting or succumbing to the relentless pressure. The Cubans, his most loyal and hardened core, were beginning to break down, their faces etched with despair, seeing death lurking in every ravine, every shadowed crevice. Che, in his heart of hearts, knew precisely how this tragic story would conclude. He had, in a sense, already written it himself in the pages of his Congo diary, only with different names, different faces. Revolution, without the necessary, fertile conditions for revolution, he now painfully understood, was merely an elaborate, drawn-out suicide. Yet, he continued to walk, to push forward, one agonizing step after another, through the unforgiving terrain, because to stop, to cease his struggle, would be to admit, with a profound and crushing finality, that he had been wrong about everything, that his life's unwavering purpose had been built on a foundation of illusion. On October 8, 1967, the rugged terrain of the Quebrada del Euro ravine, which they had hoped would serve as their clandestine escape route, instead tragically transformed into a merciless trap, its steep, unyielding stone walls closing in around them. The rangers, seemingly materializing from the very earth itself, appeared on the ridges above, their forms silhouetted against the sky, as if they had been waiting for an eternity, their ambush perfectly executed. Che's M2 carbine, his loyal companion through countless battles, took a direct hit, shattered beyond repair, leaving him with a useless piece of twisted metal in his hands. Shrapnel, with a searing intensity, tore into his leg, a fresh wound added to his already battered body. He attempted to run, to flee the closing net, but the very earth beneath him seemed to conspire against his escape, grabbing at his feet, holding him fast. When Sergeant Bernardino Huanca, a local soldier, finally found him, Che uttered the now immortal words that would echo through the annals of history, resonating with a quiet defiance. "Don't shoot. I'm Che Guevara. I'm worth more to you alive than dead." They dragged him, wounded and defeated, to La Higuera, a small, unremarkable village, a place of no particular significance, save for a single one-room schoolhouse that would, in the grim irony of fate, become eternally famous for the dark events that unfolded within its humble walls. Captain Gary Prado Salmon, the Bolivian officer who led the capture, could scarcely believe their incredible luck. This mythical figure, this revolutionary, whose name struck fear into governments, now lay before him, reduced to the appearance of a broken vagrant, filthy, bleeding, utterly deflated, stripped of his legendary aura. Che, with a resigned honesty, simply told Prado that he had failed, that his grand vision was unequivocally over. The revolution that was supposed to set the entire continent of South America ablaze, that was meant to usher in a new era of liberation, had, in a profound and crushing anticlimax, ended in a dusty classroom, its walls silently bearing the marks of bullet holes, a stark testament to its violent conclusion. The next morning, Felix Rodriguez, a Cuban exile working clandestinely for the CIA, arrived on the scene. He carried a camera, documenting the capture, and direct orders from Langley: keep Che alive for extensive interrogation, extract every last piece of intelligence. However, the Bolivian High Command, with a more immediate and ruthless agenda, had entirely different plans. President René Barrientos, fearful of the political complications and the potent symbolism a live Che Guevara would represent, wanted the problem to simply disappear. No public trial, no grand revolutionary speeches from the dock, no chance for Che to transform into a living defiant symbol of rebellion. Rodriguez, receiving the coded instructions over the radio, heard the chilling code words, 500-600. The meaning was unmistakable: Che Guevara would die at 1:10. That very afternoon, they dispatched Sergeant Mario Terran to carry out the execution, but at first he faltered, his resolve crumbling. He stood trembling in the doorway, his rifle shaking uncontrollably, staring at this man, this legendary figure, who had instilled such terror in governments, yet now appeared so utterly vulnerable. Che, with a steady gaze, looked at him, and calmly uttered, "Shoot, coward, you are only killing a man." Terran, unable to proceed, left the room, his courage failing him, and had to be forcibly ordered back to complete the grim task. The second time, he fortified his nerves with alcohol, seeking a false bravery. Precisely at 1:10, he fired a burst of bullets into Che's chest. The heroic guerrilla, the indomitable revolutionary, crumpled against the dirt floor, his eyes, even in death, remaining open, still fixed upon something, some unseen horizon, that only he could perceive. They strapped his lifeless body to a helicopter skid, a final ignominious journey, and flew him to Vallegrande, where he was publicly displayed on a crude concrete laundry sink in the local hospital, a macabre trophy. Photographers, drawn by the grim spectacle, noted the eerie resemblance. He looked strikingly like Christ in those haunting Renaissance paintings, wounded, sacrificial, a martyr. The very soldiers who had relentlessly hunted him, who had sought his death, now reached out, almost reverently, to touch his hair, as if hoping to absorb some of his potent indefinable power. Nuns, in a quiet devotional act, snipped locks of his hair, as keepsakes, recognizing the iconic significance of the fallen figure. Everyone present, it seemed, whether friend or foe, began to understand that they were looking at something far larger, far more profound, than merely a dead revolutionary. The military, in a brutal act of dehumanization, amputated his hands for fingerprints, undeniable proof for the world that Che Guevara was definitively dead. Then, under the cloak of secrecy, they buried him unceremoniously near the airstrip, in an unmarked grave, without a monument, without ceremony, nothing that could become a shrine, a rallying point. For 30 long years, his remains lay hidden in that anonymous plot, a forgotten secret beneath the Bolivian earth. But in July of 1997, his skeleton was finally discovered, meticulously identified, and returned to Cuba, where it was received with a triumphant carnival of state ceremony, a lavish spectacle of national mourning and celebration. They had desperately tried to disappear him, to erase his memory, but his very absence had only served to make him stronger, his legend growing in the silent vacuum he left behind. Someone, in an act of defiant tribute, spray-painted the truth on a wall in Vallegrande: Che, alive as they never wanted you to be. Death had achieved what life, with all its struggles and failures, could not. It had transformed a defeated revolutionary into an eternal, unkillable symbol, a compelling face now plastered on 10 million t-shirts. A persistent dream that refused to be extinguished because it was already, in its ultimate perfection, beyond the reach of failure or compromise, beyond the mundane confines of reality itself.
They buried Che Guevara in 1967, beneath the indifferent soil of Bolivia, but he would not, could not, remain dead. Within mere months of his execution, his image, his striking, defiant face, seemed to be everywhere, staring out from posters adorning the dormitories of Paris, where students, fueled by a nascent revolutionary spirit, were building barricades against the state, their protests echoing with the distant sounds of revolution. In May of 1968, French revolutionaries, many of whom had never even touched a rifle, carried his iconic image through the acrid clouds of tear gas and over the shards of broken glass, a silent shield against the establishment. In Berkeley, a hub of American descent, in the bustling streets of Mexico City, and in the vibrant heart of Tokyo, young people, many unable to correctly pronounce his name, wore his face like a potent armor against the stifling world their parents had meticulously constructed for them, a symbol of defiance and aspiration. Alberto Corder's famous photograph, taken in 1960, did most of the work, crystallizing his image forever. It depicted Chase at a funeral, his gaze piercing past the camera, fixed on some impossible, unseen horizon, a look of profound intensity and visionary foresight. Corder, with a selfless revolutionary spirit, never copyrighted the image, believing that the revolution, in its purest form, should never be commodified, never reduced to a mere product. And so, the image spread like wildfire, reproduced endlessly, each copy amplifying his myth, transforming him from a mere man into an indelible legend. The photograph rapidly became the most reproduced image in history, a fact that would no doubt
have greatly amused Chase, who above all else, disdained personality cults and individual adoration. The very capitalists he had dedicated his life to fighting, the system he sought to dismantle, ironically turned him into their best-selling product, a profound testament to his enduring appeal. By the 1990s, one could purchase Che vodka, Che cigarettes, and even Che bikinis, transforming his image into a global brand. Madonna, a pop icon, proudly wore him on her chest, a fashion statement. Models strutted down high-fashion runways in designer Che wear, garments that cost more than many Cuban workers earned in an entire year. A supreme irony that would have provoked either a bitter laugh or a profound sadness from him, or perhaps both. Revolution, repackaged as a fashion statement. Rebellion, now conveniently purchasable with a credit card, stripping it of its raw, dangerous essence. Yet, something else, something far more profound and harder to dismiss, was simultaneously unfolding. In the rugged mountains of Chiapas, Zapatista rebels proudly carried his picture alongside that of Emiliano Zapata, the legendary Mexican revolutionary, twin saints of indigenous liberation, their spirits united in a common struggle. In Colombia, the FARC, still engaged in their seemingly endless war, quoted his guerrilla manuals as sacred texts, guiding their strategy. In Palestine, freedom fighters wore Chase shirts beneath their combat vests, adopting him as a universal symbol of resistance. He had, in essence, transformed into the patron saint of anyone who dared to pick up a gun against established power, regardless of whether he would have approved of their specific cause or methods. Castro, ever the astute manipulator of narrative, molded him into Cuba's secular Christ, erecting towering monuments, establishing dedicated museums, and naming countless schools and hospitals in his honor. Every Cuban child learned to chant the pervasive slogan, "Seremos como Chase," we will be like Chase. But the Chase they were taught to emulate was a carefully sanitized version, scrubbed clean for state consumption. The Chase, who never questioned Fidel, who never openly criticized the Soviet Union, who conveniently died far from Cuba, in a place where his uncompromising, impossible standards could not complicate the delicate political dance of the established regime. In Bolivia, the very land where they had brutally ended his life, something even stranger transpired. The same peasants who had, in their fear or pragmatism, betrayed him to the army, began to pray to San Ernesto of La Higuera. They lit flickering candles at the sight of his death, imploring him to cure their sick children, to bring forth rain for their parched crops. The Catholic Church, predictably, condemned this burgeoning folk cult, but the rural Bolivians, steeped in their ancient traditions and spiritual beliefs, simply did not care. They had transformed their executioner's victim into their protector, a profound act of spiritual reclamation, history's darkest, most ironic joke. Scholars, in their tireless pursuit of understanding, penned thousands of books, each attempting to unravel the enigma of his life. Marxist theoreticians meticulously analyzed his economic theories, often concluding that he had been profoundly naive about the complex realities of human nature. Military historians studied his guerrilla tactics, painstakingly noting every strategic mistake and misstep. Psychologists, with the benefit of hindsight, posthumously diagnosed him with a myriad of conditions, ranging from narcissism to a full-blown Christ complex. Everyone, it seemed, had a theory to explain why he had ultimately failed, but no one could adequately explain why, despite all their efforts, he simply would not disappear. Why his image and his spirit lingered so tenaciously. Because here is what truly survived, beyond the brutal bullets, beyond the academic books, and beyond the superficial allure of boutique revolution merchandise. The enduring, powerful idea that someone born into a life of inherent comfort could, by an act of profound will, choose discomfort for the sake of deeply held principles. That a doctor, a healer by trade,
could transform into a killer, driven by an almost paradoxical fierce kindness, a ruthless compassion for the oppressed. That failure, in the grand sweep of history, might be immeasurably more honorable than success. If that failure was born of an attempt to achieve the impossible, every generation since his death has rediscovered him anew, finding in that frozen iconic face whatever they desperately needed to find: hope, usually, or perhaps simply the profound permission to hope, which in its essence amounts to the very same thing. 50 years after they shot him in that humble schoolhouse, Che Guevara had become precisely what he had never, in his lifetime, wanted to be, and yet, paradoxically, everything he had always been: a symbol, emptied of its specific complex meanings, only to be refilled with whatever meaning people required. A blank canvas for their dreams and aspirations. The teenager in Tehran, wearing his face on a t-shirt, likely did not know he had executed deserters. The banker in London, sipping coffee from a Che mug, probably did not know he had fiercely banned Soviet bonuses. They knew only the stark outline, the powerful shadow, the beautiful corpse who died trying, against all odds, to change the world. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is enough. Maybe that is the true, elusive mechanism of how revolutions truly work, not through conventional victory, but through the enduring resonant stories that victories, and even heroic failures, leave behind, etched into the collective memory of humanity. Che had ardently desired to create the new man, through sheer force of will and profound sacrifice. Instead, in a final, transcendent act, he became him, forever frozen at 39, eternally young, forever pure in his idealism, forever on the precipice of winning the revolution that in its perfect imagined form would never quite come. The asthmatic boy from Argentina had in the end found the only lasting cure for his condition. He had stopped breathing altogether, and in that cessation, he began living everywhere, in every raised fist, in every desperate dream, alive as they never, in their deepest fears, wanted him to be.